When talking about fantasy RPGs, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Swords and shields? Or maybe magical spells? Or maybe martial arts masters who can run faster than a small car? That's right, today we're talking about everybody's favorite masters of Ki. Chi? Kai? It's Monks today on D&D versus Pathfinder. Roll super cool, expensive intro sequence. If you haven't seen the first episode of this series, first off, what are you doing? Second off, let me explain exactly how all this works. This is not kindling for a flame war. I will not be calling one system better than the other in this video. I will be comparing and contrasting the strengths and weaknesses of both systems and letting you decide in the comments below. I'm going to break the class down into 4 basic game design elements: simplicity, flavor, efficiency, and balance. We'll talk about how each system handles each of these elements, what they do well and what they do poorly, and finally I'll leave it up to all of you in the comments to tell me which system you think did it better. With all that being said, let's get advertising. Did you know that the Sinclair's Library Kickstarter is fast approaching? That's right, y'all. The launch date is getting closer and closer, and with it, more and more cool stuff to show off to you guys. Like this. Check out the Cursebreaker archetype, which is a whole character archetype built around removing curses, getting bonuses to fighting creatures afflicted by curses, and removing them from items. Alternatively, rip your foes asunder with the new Whip Master archetype, allowing a lot of new actions and utility for this sorely underused weapon. If you're a GM, the Codex has tons of NPCs to play with. Replace those nameless, boring bandits with the Tiny Furies, a bandit gang comprised entirely of small-sized races. Every NPC in this book comes with a stat block, a backstory, a plot hook, and more. It is going to be the single most useful tool in a GM's toolbox. And which system do you play? Pathfinder 2e? D&D 5e? Well, either way, we've got you covered. The entirety of Sinclair's library, both the Almanac and the Codex, will be converted to both systems as separate books. You can get the Almanac and Codex entirely in Pathfinder or entirely in D&D 5e, whichever one your table wants to play. So click the link in the description below and sign up for our mailing list right now to know right when it goes live. It's not going to be much longer, y'all. I can't wait. The Monk fills an interesting niche in D&D and Pathfinder. They stand out as one of the most unique character options available in both systems. So let's look at the Player's Handbook and the core rulebook to see exactly what they have to offer. Let's start with the simplicity of the Monk in each system, starting off with the 5e rendition. In all honesty, there is a lot going on here, and the Monk is no contest the most complicated martial class in D&D. Let's put things into perspective. At level 7, a fighter has 5 unique class features. Their action surge, their second wind, fighting style, and 2 things from their subclass. That's it. The Monk, on the other hand, at the same level, has 12 unique features. That is more than twice as much content that this class gets over the fighter. If you're playing in a campaign that starts at level 1 and levels up at a reasonably slow pace, it's not so bad. Level 1 gives you increased AC and better unarmed strikes. Level 2 gives you movement speed and a little bit of magic. But there's a special case when talking about D&D 5e specifically that changes this argument. I'd like to bring up this chart that I talked about last week. See, most campaigns don't start at level 1. When playing 5th edition, most campaigns tend to start at 3rd level, as that's when every class has their subclass and full identity. What this means is if a new player joins a campaign and it starts at level 3, they're going to need to understand 6 separate unique mechanics that only apply to their character. That's unarmored defense, martial arts, key points, unarmored movements, their entire subclass, and deflect missiles, all right in the first session of the game. For a new player, this is a lot, and unfortunately it doesn't really stop. Most classes in 5e actually only get a feature every 2, sometimes 3 levels, but the Monk is really an exception to this case. Monks tend to get a new feature almost every single level from 1 to 20. The only levels where they get nothing are 8, 12, 16, and 19, and that's because they get an ASI instead. And it's also not like these new features are just passive static upgrades to existing features. No, these are fully fledged new features they need to learn and commit to memory. As I stated in the previous episode of this series, simplicity is not inherently a good or bad thing. It is up to the player themselves to determine that. But I like to think of the games from a new player perspective, and I would never recommend the Monk class to a new player. If they feel gung-ho and want to read up and learn all about it, more power to them. But if it is their first experience with a tabletop role-playing game, the 5e Monk could be a really easy way to scare somebody away from the table. But now let's flip over to Pathfinder. How do they fare when it comes to simplicity? Well, pretty well, actually. I like to reiterate something from the previous video. With the Monk in Pathfinder 2e, it will be as complicated as you choose to make it. They get some of the same standard leveling features as the 5e Monk did, but they do not get nearly as many universally amongst all monks. They have an increased proficiency with unarmored defense, which in Pathfinder 2e is its own type of armor set, and Powerful Fist has been made into a simple level 1 class feature, which just increases your damage die to a d6 and allows you to make it lethal. The biggest difference between the two monks at low levels is the key points / key spells. In Pathfinder 2e, key is not an inherent part of the monk's identity. In fact, unless you take specific feats, you will not get any type of key magic or powers. Flurry of Blows is free in Pathfinder 2e. It's a one action to attack twice, very similar to the 5e version, but you can do it every turn. There's just a limit of once per turn. Aside from these features and the incredible movement feature at level 3, the monk only gains 3 more unique features as they level up, and these are the 3 paths to perfection, which simply boost their saving throws. Returning to what I mentioned earlier, the monk in Pathfinder 2e is only as complicated as you choose to make it, and that is due in no small part to Pathfinder's, dare I say, revolutionary stance system. Most feats available to level 1 monks are stances. These take one action to enter, and for the rest of combat, your unarmed strikes will be augmented depending on your stance. For example, if you enter Dragon Stance, your unarmed strikes become D10s. Or Tiger Stance makes them D8s and they deal slashing damage instead of bludgeoning. While at first glance, choice paralysis can set in. There's a lot of stances just in the core rulebook. However, once you've picked a stance, character customization and development is actually relatively simple. Every few levels, there are feats that are direct upgrades to stances. So if at level 1 you picked Wolf Stance, chances are at level 6 you'll pick up Wolf Drag. On the levels where no such obvious feat exists, you have a few options. You can choose to take a different stance to give yourself versatility to switch between stances, or maybe pick up a little bit of key magic with those feats, or just take a quality of life improvement like Dancing Leaf, which makes you jump higher. It's simple, but it's good and useful. I got multiple comments on the last video telling me that Pathfinder's feat system is intrinsically more complicated than D&D 5th Edition's development system, and you're right. I will never disagree with that fact. However, it is not as complicated as people like to think, not because of the barrier of entry. It does still take learning, but once you have learned the feat system once, it is the same for every class in the game. Is it an even level? You're getting a class feat. This is different than D&D 5th Edition, where different classes get different features at different levels. Overall, neither system's monk is necessarily simple. Pathfinder allows for a smoother development progress through the selection of very specific feats. Meanwhile, D&D removes the complexity of choice, but throws so many different features at the player that it can prove overwhelming. Flavor is going to be a difficult one to discuss. A lot of 5e players disregard the monk because the Eastern martial arts inspired abilities don't mesh well with their Euro-medieval fantasy setting. And to that, I say, get over it. I mean, am I wrong? Brain-sucking octopi, totally fine. Martial arts? Not in my game. I'm sorry. When it comes to the flavor of a class, it needs to feel accurate to its depiction. And 5e honestly does this really well. All of the features make the character feel like the protagonist in an action movie. Literally deflecting projectiles, jumping off of tall buildings, and unleashing flurries of devastating combos on their opponents. Even as they progress in level, the monk's flavor doesn't go away, it just changes. After about level 10, they stop getting these high-octane action features and start getting much more peace of mind focus as this grizzled veteran discovers their perfect body. The only points I'll dock for flavor is that this is really the only type of monk mechanically you can make. It doesn't matter if your wily, chaotic, neutral gnome monk doesn't really care about inner peace. Once you hit level 10, he's getting purity of body and then later diamond soul. You don't get a choice. On the other side of things, Pathfinder's monk is... guys, it's perfection. Strictly speaking of flavor, you can design any kind of monk you can think of. Classic monk, take some key feats. You want to be more of a martial arts master? Focus on one or two stances. Do you want to be an archer? Yes, an archer? Take the monastic archery stance and use flurry of bows. These stances allow so much customization and allow you to make a monk that feels exactly like you want them to feel. It puts the very idea of subclasses to shame. The monk doesn't need subclasses because every feat you take is like customizing a subclass down to each individual mechanic. Will you master one stance? Will you be a master of many? Will you focus on your magic to carry you through the fight? It's completely up to you. Up until this point, the two systems have been relatively similar in their discussion, but here talking about efficiency, they're going to diverge quite a bit. The 5e monk is honestly pretty simple with its efficiency on paper. You walk up, you attack, you flurry of blows, stunning fist. Turn's over. You'll see this a lot, but monks can do a lot more. So much more that a lot of people have trouble remembering exactly what they can do. Deflect missiles, slow fall, and stillness of mind all sound really cool when you get them, but 12 sessions later, when a charm effect comes up, it's really easy to forget you have that ability, and then 2 turns down the line go, oh shoot, GM, I could have ended that a turn early. Can I just go back and do that and take my extra turn? And it can really get muddy when talking about the efficiency of game flow. These aren't bad abilities. The monk just gets such a big grab bag of reactions and abilities that have specific triggers that it's hard to keep them all in mind when such a trigger actually comes up. That's not even to mention their subclasses, which, honestly, all things considered, aren't that bad. Shadow gets some minor magics and illusions, Open Palm can heal themselves and knock people prone, and 4 Elements is basically a spellcaster with a unique spell list. The subclasses hardly determine how the class plays in combat. Usually they'll just take something the monk was already doing and add an additional flair or effect to it. The only exception really being 4 Elements, as they get completely new actions in their elemental spells. Meanwhile, over in Pathfinder 2e, a monk can tend to feel too efficient? Yeah, I said too efficient as a bad thing. Let me explain. 2e monks, especially at low levels, are going to fall into a rhythm. I walk up to them, I flurry of blows, and I attack again. Maybe, if you're feeling frisky, you'll grapple them. If you specifically design your character around one stance, your first turn of combat is going to be I enter the stance, I walk up to them, and I flurry of blows, the end. Now this gets much better at higher levels, or if you're a key-focused monk with different spells as options. This is again kind of comes down to how you build the monk. If you build your monk around spamming the attack action, well, in combat you're probably going to be spamming the attack action. Just be prepared. With the key-focused monk as the only real exception, from levels 1 to 5, you're probably going to be walking and attacking a lot as a monk. To its benefit, it does lead to very quick turns in combat if you already know what you're doing, but like I said, there is such a thing as too efficient. And this is what it all comes to, isn't it? Balance. If your class is overpowered or underperforms when compared to the other classes in your system, it is not a well-designed class, and balance depending on who you're talking to, can be the single most important factor of a class's design. So how do our two martial artists stack up in their respective systems? Well, the 5e monk is absolutely broken. There's no two ways about it. Their insane movement speed, the insane number of attacks they get, the free reduction of range damage, and the ability to use Stunning Strike, which is better than anything else that will cost a key point, so you're going to use it every single turn and force enemies to skip their turn with like a 50+% success rate because of the bounded accuracy of the system. Don't get me wrong, that's an insane ability, but it's a little too good. Not to mention they're immune to poison, they're immune to aging, and can literally jump off of a skyscraper at level 15 and take 0 fall damage. All of this on top of subclasses that give you really cool features that you'll almost never use because Stunning Strike is better. This class is not balanced. This class is not bad. It is in fact really fun to play, but compared to the rest of the system, the monk can just do too much and has way too reliable options. And I think the biggest issue that gets me personally is that most of their crazy power spikes are ingrained in the base class. What you pick for a subclass doesn't matter. You're still getting Stillness of Mind. You're still getting Stunning Strike. You're still getting Unarmored Movement. You're getting all the things that make the monk amazing. Your subclass just might give you invisibility or something. The subclass should grant the monk an overly powered ability compared to the base kit that makes them feel special compared to other monks. In the base rulebook, it doesn't matter if you're a Shadow, 4 Elements, or Open Palm monk. Stunning Strike will work just as well. Maybe this isn't so much of an issue with the newer monastic traditions, but just looking at the player's handbook, this class needs a lot of work. And it is easily the strongest martial class in D&D 5th edition. Well, what about the Pathfinder monk? Is it just as broken? Is it just as overpowered and puts its fellow classes to shame? Kinda, yeah. At early levels, the ability to have access to a 1d10 unarmed attack is ridiculous. You can't disarm a monk of their dragon stance. They're just gonna hit you with the same power as a great axe.
Actually, you know that a great axe does 1d12? You would be thinking of a great club that does 1d10.
Thank you, nerd. Now, I will say, their attacks are heavily weakened compared to D&D 5e. All of your attacks in D&D are made at the full bonus, meanwhile Pathfinder 2e suffers from the multiple attack penalty, meaning each subsequent attack on the same turn is going to be at -5. So Flurry of Blows isn't as crazy powerful. Fast forward just a few levels and that same monk can deal damage when they grapple people, heal themselves, reduce the armor class, attack roll, and saving throw of everything in a 15-foot emanation, and run directly vertically up a 40-foot high waterfall at level 10. Oh, and by the way, they can fly at level 12. Now, this all sounds incredible, and that's because it is, but it's not as big a deal as I make it out to be, because everything in Pathfinder 2e tends to be a bit more grandiose. Don't get me wrong, the monk is still incredibly versatile and powerful with all of its feats, both offensively, defensively, and utility-ly. But tons of other classes that are a bit more specialized can do even more insane things. But you couple together all of these amazing monk abilities with the fact that they have the highest saving throws in the game and are second highest armor class in the game, and yeah, I'll be honest, I think you have the strongest martial class in Pathfinder 2e. If not one of the strongest. At the end of the day, the monk sticks out a lot in both systems. They do things in a different way than similar classes might. In D&D, they don't get magic, they get key points. In Pathfinder, they don't just attack, they enter stances to change their fists. Both games do a great job of giving the monk its own identity beyond just a fighter who punches things. And that's amazing and so important, because a monk should feel different. If it just felt the same as any other martial class, just with more unarmed focused, it would feel so much less special to play. Both systems have done a fantastic job of giving the monk its own identity within their system, both mechanically and flavorly. But now it's time for homework. What do you think? Which version of the monk class do you prefer? The D&D 5th edition version with its crazy powerhouse of 1,000 different features, or the more streamlined but still really strong Pathfinder 2e Monk with its stance focus? Let me know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, go ahead and tell me what you want to see me cover for the next D&D versus Pathfinder. Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to help us in the algorithm, because that helps these videos reach more people. Thank you all so much for the massive support I got on the first episode of this series. If it keeps up, I will plan to do this for, every class and then some. I want to cover some unique topics, like spell casting specifically. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons for making all of this happen. Without them, I would not be where I am, and this series probably wouldn't exist. So thank you so much to everyone on the screen. Don't forget to click the link in the description to sign up for the Sinclair's Library mailing list. Trust me, trust me, trust me, you don't want to miss this Kickstarter when it goes live. That is all for me. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones.